Hi, I'm Fareed Simpson-Hankins. Welcome to episode 3 of the Second Line Bebop series. Thank you for tuning in to the Second Line Bebop series. This is episode 3, the Fireside Chat. The Second Line Bebop series is a project about two great cities, Philadelphia and New Orleans. And these are two cities with a lot of culture and tradition and history and heritage. The term Second Line Bebop was inspired by Philadelphia saxophonist Jimmy Heath. It pays homage to the spirit and party-like atmosphere of the New Orleans Second Line and is a reference to the distinctive style, swing, and soulfulness of Philly's musicians. This is about exploring the cultural parallels with a focus on jazz music. This was done through observation of the traditions, participation within the community, and interviews with members of the Jazz Network. I'm sure you've noticed some of the parallels between the first two episodes, such as the call and response melodies, visual imagery, and also the juxtaposition in the distinguished regional sounds. There's so much history and traditions built into both of these cities. Congo Square, where enslaved people were allowed to practice their music and their dance and their drumming. Every other place were stripped of their music. They were stripped of their identity. They were stripped of their native tongue and their dance. In Congo Square, this place, they were allowed to congregate. And it also served as a place of commerce and fellowship. A lot of history was passed down in this place. This place is now called Louis Armstrong Park. Now, a hidden secret about Philly is that there was a place called Congo Square, where the city's free and enslaved black people would gather in the early colonial times. Philly had the nation's largest free black population during this time, and they congregated for celebrations, holidays, funerals, dancing, and speaking native languages. Philly's Congo Square was eventually renamed and repurposed to Washington Square Park, and the black gatherings ceased. One of the early great black musicians of America is named Francis Johnson, and he was born in Philadelphia. Now, Francis Johnson was the first black musician to get his music published in the United States, and he was also America's first touring band. His band went from Philly to Buckingham Palace to play for the Queen, where he was given the gift of a bugle. Now, Francis Johnson played the bugle, and he also played the violin, and he also taught other black musicians how to play. His band took popular songs and varied the rhythms and they varied the melody, and this is one of the early foundations of jazz music. In the early part of the 20th century, the Great Migration took place. A lot of black people moved from the South to the North. They brought with them their culture, they brought their music, they brought their dance, their foods, their traditions, their way of life, the way they interact. Commune, it became a melting pot of culture. In New Orleans, the trumpet is the king and the drums are the queen. In Philadelphia, the saxophone is the king and the drums are the queen. And this is demonstrated in the two cities' great heroes. For New Orleans, Louis Armstrong. In Philly, John Coltrane. These are the city's heroes when it comes to jazz music. And this is in the city sounds. With Louis Armstrong, his sound is celebratory, joyful, and optimistic. The common sound associated with New Orleans is like a party. In Philly, the sound of John Coltrane, which is soulful, gritty, exploratory, ancestral, this is built into the sounds of Philadelphia. This Second Line Bebop series requires us to explore the regional identities of each city. That's important because we have to classify the achievements and laud the heroes of each city. So what makes somebody from a city is not simply their location of birth, where they were born. It's their contributions to the community and their associations and their legacy. And we see this with John Coltrane. John Coltrane was born in North Carolina, and he came to Philly as part of the Great Migration when he was 17 years old. He studied music in the city. He became part of the scene. He was playing in bands with people like Jimmy Heath and Benny Golson and Lee Morgan. He left his legacy on the city. Dizzy Gillespie did the same thing. Dizzy Gillespie came to Philly when he was 17 years old from South Carolina, part of the Great Migration. He joined Frank Fairfax's band. And Frank Fairfax is one of the people who founded Union Local 274, which would later found the Clef Club of Performing Arts. And Dizzy Gillespie was playing in Frank Fairfax's band. And Frank Fairfax gave him the nickname Dizzy. He got his name Dizzy while he was living in Philly. Louis Armstrong was born in New Orleans. He defined what the quarter note is in jazz music, and he is responsible for making it a soloistic art form. In his 20s, he left New Orleans and he went to Chicago with King Oliver. And from there he went to New York and then back to Chicago, back to New York. But he left his strong legacy on the city. All the trumpet players, all the musicians looks up to Louis Armstrong. It's built into their culture. When musicians from Philly and New Orleans come together to play, a great product is always created. There's always synergy and authentic musical experience. Some of these combined alliances include people like Wynton Marsalis and Charles Fambrough, Terrence Blanchard, Branford Marsalis and Christian McBride, Louis Armstrong, Coatesville Harris and Butch Ballard, John Coltrane, Percy Heath, and Ed Blackwell. One of the great things about these two cities is that their musicians have had a very powerful and strong presence in Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers. So initially, we would see people like Lee Morgan and Jimmy Merritt and Benny Golson, Bobby Timmons, Robin Eubanks from Philly. And then in New Orleans, we would see people like Wynton Marsalis, Branford Marsalis, Donald Harrison, and Terrence Blanchard join the Jazz Messengers with Art Blakey. Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers were an institution of education. Another commonality here is there are these prominent musical families, and there's lineage within those families and a wealth of information that goes back for generations and generations. In both of these cities, there are great schools where a lot of the musicians come from. In Philly, we have the Creative and Performing Arts High School, where Boyz II Men and Christian McBride and Questlove and Jasmine Sullivan all went to school. And we have Central High School, where Bill Cosby and the Eubanks brothers went to high school. In New Orleans, we have the New Orleans Center for the Creative Arts, where people like John Batiste and Wynton Marsalis and Terrence Blanchard, Leroy Jones, Trombone Shorty, Harry Connick Jr. all went to school, and they studied with Ellis Marsalis. One of the cool things about New Orleans is that the high school band is more popular than the high school football team. All the kids who go to the schools, they all want to be a part of the Mardi Gras parade. Some of the bands have 300 people in the band. The public schools, the charter schools, and the Catholic schools all have bands. One of the direct correlations of these two cities is the Mardi Gras Indians and the Mummers of Philadelphia. Now, the Mardi Gras Indians are very secretive, and they have a lot of culture and tradition and heritage. And a lot of the people in the city will say that the Mardi Gras Indians are the root of the music. Now, they have dances and chants, and they parade, and they have different tribes that the people are part of that you have to be born into. The Mardi Gras Indians, they spend all year preparing for their parade, and they build all of their costumes from scratch, some with feathers and all kinds of different materials. And they work all year round and spend thousands of dollars building their outfit during Mardi Gras. In Philly, the Mummers will spend all year working on their costumes, and they'll parade in the New Year's parade. There are different clubs in South Philly where each of the different bands get together, and they build their costumes, and their costumes look identical to the Mardi Gras Indians' costumes. They masquerade. As a minstrel performance and America's oldest folk parade, the Mummers frequently mock social issues. They're both a parallel of and a parody to the Mardi Gras Indians. There are also parallels within the spirituality of each city. Mahalia Jackson is a legendary gospel singer, sang spirituals, and she's from New Orleans. Now, Mahalia Jackson formed a musical alliance with Thomas Dorsey, who is the father of gospel music. But when you ask Thomas Dorsey, who is the real father of gospel music, he'll tell you Charles Tindley, who was from Philadelphia. Charles Tindley is now known as the grandfather of gospel music. He built his church in South Philly, and he is known as the originator of gospel music. Tindley wrote the song By and By, which is performed in New Orleans parades and funerals, as well as I'll Overcome Someday, which was the blueprint for the civil rights movement anthem, We Shall Overcome. In fact, Philly is home to the African Methodist Episcopal AME Church, which was the first church to initiate a trained choir into their worship service. The black musical lineage of Philly comes through the black churches. If we're going to talk about gospel music in Philly, we can't neglect people like Marian Anderson, a legendary mezzo-soprano from South Philadelphia, and Paul Robeson, who lives in West Philadelphia. And both of these two people were known for their spirituals and many other things. Both of their homes are now museums. Now we have to talk about the tourism. New Orleans has found a way to have their jazz music and all their other New Orleans styles of music, New Orleans funk, Zydeco, traditional New Orleans jazz, and there's bands on Bourbon Street that play Chaka Khan and other R&B and soul hits. There's the Mardi Gras Indians music. They found a way to have all of that included in their tourism. Philly has a lot of various styles of music, swing, the Philly soul, the funk, R&B. There's a lot of salsa in Philly and a lot of wedding bands in Philly that play a lot of pop music. Philly has a lot of big bands and a long big band history. But Philly has not found a way to include their music into the tourism. New Orleans has the powerful tip jar. And when people come to visit New Orleans, they want to spend their money. They want to give the band money. Almost every club will have a tip jar for the bands. Even the bands outside on the streets have their tip jar, and they make a lot of money too, just like the people in the clubs off of the tips. And they play various styles of New Orleans music into their repertoire. The bands are even willing to take requests and even play till after the club closes, very late into the night, for monetary donations into their tip jar. Music has a very important place within these two cities. In Philly, there's block parties with music. There's the Philly Elmo, who comes around with a drum. And there's drill teams who march through the city neighborhoods playing drums. And there's drummers and bands at the sports games. Or just any day on the street, you'll just see a drum line marching down the street. Or you'll hear the drum line. Or see a drill team. In New Orleans, they have parades and second lines that go through the neighborhoods. And everybody in the neighborhood hears this music. And they have clubs that will have a straight ahead jazz band on the inside and then a brass band outside. And people will fellowship and commune and get together and have a good time with all this music happening at the same exact time. When talking about these other styles of music, we have to realize the fact that the two biggest late night shows in America, they're run by musicians from Philadelphia and New Orleans. John Batiste from New Orleans is the music director for The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. The Roots is the house band for Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon. This speaks to the powerful musical traditions that come from these two cities. And it is also perpetuated by other factors. In the 1970s, New Orleans created the Jazz and Heritage Festival. This festival is known all around the world. And this festival puts New Orleans culture on full display. And there's other festivals run by other corporations too, like the Essence Festival. There's movies that put New Orleans culture out into the mainstream of the world, like Girls Trip, or the TV show Charme. So people all around the country know about the culture of New Orleans, the food, the music, the dance, the way the people are. Movies in Philadelphia don't necessarily highlight multiple components of culture. So there's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Rocky, Creed. But they highlight distinct parts. Like they may show the 9th Street Italian Market or the Art Museum steps or the best place to get a cheesesteak, but they don't include various parts. Food and cuisine are both built into the two cities' tourism. In New Orleans, their cuisine has a combination of Creole, Cajun, African, Spanish, French, and American influence. And this gives them special New Orleans foods and New Orleans flavors with foods like the po' boy and crawfish and oysters and shrimp and the gumbo. In Philly, there's the Philly cheesesteak, and there's water ice and soft pretzels and tasty cakes and cream cheese and the hoagies. And people will visit New Orleans for the cuisine. They want to eat all the New Orleans foods and taste the entire city. In Philly, people will visit for specific food items. There's even cross-exchange with the Philly cheesesteak po' boy. In Philadelphia, there are murals everywhere. There's artwork all around the entire city. In New Orleans, there's artwork, colorful artwork that display different parts of the culture all around the city. One of the main differences I've noticed in this is that New Orleans perceives itself as a culture, whereas Philly perceives itself as a community. There are a lot more commonalities between the two cities, but the perception or the way they're marketed is very different. Again, this was episode 3 of the Second Line Bebop series. Thank you to all the people who helped with this project, all the people who agreed to be interviewed and gave their perspectives on the cultures and communities and everything else going on within the cities. Thank you to the project advisors, both Terrell Stafford and Tim Warfield. Thank you to Dean Flanagan. Thank you to the Presser Foundation for supporting this research project. And thank you to Temple University. Thank you for watching the Second Line Bebop series.